one overlooked couple, one dismissive waitress, and a simple dinner that turned into a lesson or unexpected, a moment that would leave everyone speechless. The sun cast a soft golden hue through the wide café windows, painting lazy streaks of light across the floor. It was a typical Saturday afternoon, the kind where time seemed to move slower, and conversations filled the air like background music. Laughter, the clink of utensils, the hiss of espresso machines. Everything felt comfortably ordinary. Then the door chimed. Malik stepped in first, holding the door open with quiet grace. He wore a crisp button-down shirt, subtle but elegant, and a look that combined calm confidence with quiet observance. Tasha followed beside him, her braided hair pulled neatly back, a warm smile resting effortlessly on her face. Their hands were entwined, fingers locked in that gentle, unspoken rhythm that only long love can create. As they entered, the ambient hum of the cafe didn't quite stop, but it stuttered, just for a beat. Danielle, a waitress in her mid-20s, stood at the far end of the cafe, wiping down a recently vacated table. She looked up at the sound of the door, eyes quickly scanning the couple, and then she rolled them, not subtly, not playfully, not even out of exhaustion. A slow, deliberate roll of the eyes that betrayed something heavier, annoyance, discomfort, maybe worse. She exhaled, just loud enough for herself, and dropped the damp cloth onto a tray. Her shoulders slumped slightly as if bracing for inconvenience. She walked toward them, her steps lacking the bounce and brightness she'd given to the group of college kids just 15 minutes earlier. No smile. No good afternoon, no welcome in, just a menus, handed off mechanically. Malik received his without hesitation. "Thank you," he said, warm as ever. His voice was smooth, gentle, like silk that had been through the fire and come out stronger. Danielle didn't respond. She had already turned away. Tasha raised an eyebrow slightly. "Okay then," she whispered, half amused, half wary. They made their way to a small table by the window. A beautiful spot, really, the kind couples might pick for a quiet date or a weekend brunch. Malik pulled out a chair for Tasha with a quiet smile, and she sat, smoothing her skirt with one graceful motion. Around them, the air had shifted, not in volume, but in temperature. A man 2 tables away pretended to be reading the paper, but his eyes hovered just above the fold, watching them. A young woman sipped her matcha latte more slowly now, glancing over the rim of her glass. It wasn't hostility, not exactly. It was that mix of subtle curiosity and silent judgment, the kind that wraps itself in politeness, but hangs heavy like fog. Tasha opened her menu, pretending not to notice. But her posture was a touch stiffer now. "Do you feel that?" she murmured. Malik didn't look up. He gently flipped the menu open. Tasha gave a soft scoff, her smile returning, but this time with a hint of steel. "Unbelievable." Danielle returned minutes later, not with a greeting, but a notepad, ready. She asked, her eyes barely meeting theirs. Malik closed his menu with a quiet grace. "Yes, thank you. I'll have the grilled chicken sandwich and an iced tea, unsweetened, please." Tasha looked up, offering a kind smile despite the coolness she was receiving. "And I'll take the quinoa salad. Dressing on the side. Oh, and water with lemon." Danielle scribbled without a word. "Thank you," Tasha added, gently. Still, Danielle didn't reply. She turned and walked off, not rudely, but without care. Just enough coldness to be unmistakable. Malik watched her walk away, then shifted, his gaze back to Tasha. His expression was soft, thoughtful, like someone watching a storm roll in, knowing it might pass, or it might not. "She's not even trying to hide it," Tasha said, voice low. "Nope, it's not just her either." "I know." Malik reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. His touch was steady, grounding. "Let it go for now," he said gently. "Let's just enjoy our meal." Tasha looked at him for a long moment. The tension in her shoulders eased just a little. "Okay." she whispered. Outside, people walked by, unaware of the quiet friction building inside the cafe. Inside, the couple sat poised and calm amid a subtle storm of glances, whispers, and casual disregard. They weren't new to this. Not by a long shot. But they were about to handle it in a way no one, especially Danielle, could ever predict. The minutes moved slowly, like syrup sliding down glass. Tasha sat quietly, her eyes drifting across the cafe. The sound of laughter and conversation floated around them, but none of it reached their table. The mood here was different, still, almost sterile. The space around them felt carved out, like a bubble of invisible distance had been placed between them and the rest of the room. Danielle returned to their table with 2 glasses in hand. She placed one in front of Malik. Iced tea, the drink he ordered. The other was just plain water, no lemon. She set it down without looking at Tasha. And then she walked away. No acknowledgement. No clarification, just an assumption. Tasha blinked once, slow. She forgot the lemon, she said softly, not with anger, but with the fatigue of someone who'd had this exact moment one too many times. Malik looked at the glass. At least she remembered it was water, he replied, attempting lightness. But the edge in his voice betrayed something deeper, the kind of irritation that doesn't erupt, but simmers, controlled, sharp. Tasha glanced around again. To tables. Over. The group of college students who had come in after them were already being served. Their waitress, Danielle, was with them now, chatting and laughing as if they were old friends. Her posture had changed. Shoulders back, smiling, present. She leaned in as one of the guys made a joke, even gave a playful shove to his shoulder. There was life in her voice, warmth, interest. Tasha's smile faded completely. She didn't even try to hide it. She murmured, more to herself than to Malik. Across the table, Malik folded his hands, elbows off the table, calm, steady, watching, like a man collecting evidence, not for retaliation, but for understanding. Tasha leaned in slightly. Did you see that? Malik nodded, eyes still on Danielle as she topped off one of the students' waters. This one with lemon. I saw it. His voice was quiet, but clear. A whisper carved from granite. Tasha leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. Unreal. She's showing us who she is, he said, locking eyes with his wife now. Let's see how this plays out. She studied him. The way his brows stayed relaxed, his jaws stayed unclenched. There was something powerful in that stillness. Not passivity, control. Tasha exhaled slowly. I don't get it. We came in polite, smiling. What exactly did we do wrong? You know the answer to that, Malik said. Not unkindly, she nodded, slowly. Right, we existed in the wrong skin. At that moment, Danielle returned with their food. Plates balanced expertly, like she'd done it 1,000 times. But the grace in her hands didn't extend to her expression. She didn't say a word as she set the plates down. No enjoy your meal, no eye contact, just a mechanical delivery, like she was checking off a task on her list she didn't want to write in the first place. Tasha eyed her salad. The dressing was already poured on top, thick and creamy, not on the side, as she'd clearly requested. She didn't speak. Not yet. Danielle was already halfway gone. Malik cut into his sandwich and took a slow bite. Anything you want to say? He asked gently. Tasha paused. No, not now. She picked up her fork and began eating. It wasn't the food she was chewing. It was the moment, the weight of it. The restraint. They ate quietly, while laughter continued to spill from the college students' table. Danielle returned to them again, refilling drinks, leaning in to ask about the food, even sharing a joke that drew another wave of laughter. She hadn't checked in on Malik and Tasha once. Across the room, a man at the far end of the cafe caught Tasha's gaze. He looked at her for a second too long, then looked away. Another glance from a woman at the counter. Then nothing, invisible. That's how it felt. They didn't yell. They didn't call for a manager. They didn't cause A scene. They just sat, with dignity intact, in a space that had quietly made it clear they weren't welcome. But their silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. It was patience laced with purpose. And Danielle, caught up in her own comfort and bias, had no idea what was coming. The clinking of silverware continued all around them, dishes arriving at tables with practiced rhythm, drinks being refilled, casual chatter rolling across the café like background music in a movie neither Malik nor Tasha wanted to be in. But, at their table, time had slowed again. 25 minutes had passed since Danielle took their order. Malik quietly checked his watch. He didn't sigh. He didn't complain. He simply noted the time. Tasha, however, shifted in her seat, looking toward the kitchen. Her patience, usually vast, was being steadily chipped away around them. Customers came and went. Orders were taken. Meals served. Coffee topped up. But their table remained untouched, like an afterthought in someone else's story. Finally, Danielle emerged from the kitchen, 2 plates in hand, her expression unreadable, mouth tight in a line that barely registered acknowledgement. She placed the food down with quick, silent movements, avoiding even a glance toward them. Tasha stared at her plate. It was wrong. Again. Double quotes them. This has goat cheese, she said, keeping her tone even. I asked for no cheese. Danielle's lips curled into a tight smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, she said, shrugging lightly. Guess they missed that in the kitchen. Not, I'm sorry, not let me fix that. Just a vague, dismissive statement tossed like scraps to a table she'd rather not serve. Tasha's jaw tightened. She set her fork down, untouched. This is the second mistake. Danielle tilted her head slightly. You can just pick it off if you want. The words hung in the air like smoke, passive-aggressive, with just enough of a smile to pass as not technically rude, but the intention was clear. She didn't care. Tasha opened her mouth. She was done. Done pretending not to notice, done playing polite. The slow burn had finally reached her throat, but before a word could escape, Malik's hand moved, calm and steady, and rested gently over hers. Their eyes met. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. In his touch was a quiet reminder. We're not here to match their energy. We're here to rise above it. Tasha held his gaze for a beat, then exhaled, deep, controlled. She nodded. Danielle lingered for a second, perhaps, expecting more, maybe a complaint she could roll her eyes at, or a raised voice she could report. When none came, she simply turned and walked away without another word. Tasha looked down at her plate, picking at the edge of her salad with practiced care. I don't know how you do it, she murmured. Malik sliced into his sandwich slowly, methodically. Do what? Stay so calm. I feel like I'm being eaten alive in here. Malik looked up, his eyes warm but grounded. Because I know what this is. I've seen it before. This. He gestured gently to the room, to the silence, the distance, the coldness that hung between their table and the rest of the cafe. This isn't new, but what we do in it, that's where the power is. Tasha didn't respond at first. She chewed in silence, eyes distant. Then slowly, a faint smile tugged at the corner of her lips. You're a better person than me. No, Malik said, his voice gentle. I'm just practiced. They ate quietly, not defeated. Not embarrassed, just observant, graceful, like seasoned professionals navigating a familiar storm. Their dignity undented, their composure unshaken. From time to time, Danielle would pass their table, but she never stopped, never asked how the meal was, never offered a refill. Her presence became a shadow, visible but distant, present but unavailable. She'd laugh with other tables, even crouched down beside a family near the window, her face alight with enthusiasm. But she moved past Malik and Tasha like they didn't exist, or like she wished they didn't. Still, they sat. Still, they ate. Still, they remained. Tasha finished her salad, goat cheese and all. She said nothing about it, not because it didn't matter, but because she had chosen, deliberately, to let her silence speak louder than her words. Malik finished his sandwich and wiped his hands with the edge of his napkin, careful, graceful in every movement. The kind of pause that didn't just reflect self-control, it declared it. Across the room, a young woman at another table stole a glance at them. She had noticed, somehow, what was happening. Maybe she didn't have the words for it, but she could feel it, the tension, the unfairness. She looked at Danielle, then at Malik and Tasha, her brow furrowed, but she said nothing, because that's how it usually goes. And yet, even in the face of quiet cruelty, Malik and Tasha didn't shrink. They didn't lash out. They didn't call it out with fury. Instead, they responded with a strength more subtle and far more devastating. The kind of grace that makes you remember it long after the check is paid. The plates were cleared, or rather, left for too long before Danielle bothered to pick them up. Still, Malik and Tasha remained composed, sipping what little remained of their drinks, sharing quiet conversation between the cracks of a strained afternoon. Tasha glanced toward the clock on the wall. Almost 2 hours. Malik nodded, still relaxed, the corner of his mouth tugging upward. That long, huh? Their voices held no anger, no bitterness, only the kind of weariness that grows from being forced to carry the weight of other people's judgment and choosing not to let it change who you are. Danielle finally returned to their table. Without eye contact, without words, she didn't ask if they were done. She didn't thank them. She simply reached into her apron and dropped the folded check onto the table, the way someone might toss a receipt into the trash, casually, carelessly, as though the moment was beneath her. It landed between Malik and Tasha with a soft thwop, and she turned away immediately, but Malik didn't pick it up right away. Instead, he looked up and asked, with the same calm warmth he had carried all afternoon, "Is the manager in today?" Danielle paused mid-step, her back still half-turned. Her shoulders visibly stiffened. She turned slowly. "He's yeah, but he's busy." Her voice faltered, just slightly. It wasn't the question that bothered her. It was the way Malik asked it, calm, polite, measured, no anger, no edge, just a simple request, dressed in grace. Malik smiled gently. "No worries." He reached into his leather messenger bag beside the chair and pulled out a slim, black checkbook. The action felt surreal in a space like this. Something about it felt deliberate, significant. Tasha watched quietly as he clicked open a silver pen and began writing with smooth, practiced strokes. Danielle stood frozen, uncertain now. Was he about to complain? Write a bad review? Report her? Tasha stood slowly, smoothing the lines of her dress. Her movements were precise, calm, but there was a new glint in her eyes. Not anger, not smugness, something deeper, something between quiet disappointment and deep-rooted grace, the kind that can only come from someone who's been underestimated more times than she can count. She picked up her purse and looked at Danielle with a soft smile. "We hope your day gets better," she said. Sincerely, kindly. Danielle blinked. There was no sarcasm, no edge, no passive-aggressive bite, just sincerity. Malik tore the check from the book and placed it neatly inside the black folder that had once held their receipt. He closed it gently, placed it at the edge of the table, and stood. As they made their way toward the exit, hand in hand. Once more, the sun from the window caught them like a spotlight, casting long, warm shadows behind them. It felt poetic, somehow, like the end of something unfinished. Danielle waited until the door chimes shut behind them. Then, cautiously, she approached the table. She opened the folder and froze. Inside was the bill, paid in full, and beneath it, a handwritten check, $10,000. Her breath caught. She stared at the number, blinking hard, as if her eyes were playing tricks. But it was real, signed, legible, clear as daylight, along the memo line, just for 100 words, "For your future growth." Below that, a business card, sleek, minimalist, Malik and Tasha Reynolds, founders, the Kindness Fund. Her hands began to tremble, This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a stunt. This was real. Suddenly, the weight of the afternoon came crashing down on her, but not in the way she expected. It wasn't guilt that came first. It was confusion, followed by a slow, seeping shame that spread across her chest like ice cracking beneath her feet. She remembered every moment, every missed smile, every word she hadn't said, every eye roll, every dismissive shrug. The passive insults dressed up as service, and still, they'd left her this, a tip that was more than just money. It was a mirror. Danielle sank into the empty chair beside the table, the check still in her hands. Her eyes burned with something hot and heavy, regret, maybe, or the realization that she had completely misread the people she had tried so hard to ignore. All they had shown her was patience, and kindness, and dignity, and she had returned it with indifference. But instead of punishing her, they'd rewarded her. Or maybe, she thought slowly, maybe they hadn't rewarded her. Maybe they had planted something, an opportunity, a seed. And now it was up to her what she'd do with it. Danielle stood still for a long time. The hum of the café continued around her, the hiss of steaming milk, the clatter of cups, the background murmur of half-finished conversations. But she didn't hear any of it. Her hands were locked around the black leather folder, the paper inside trembling slightly as her breath quickened. She opened it again, just to be sure. The numbers hadn't changed. $10,000, written clearly. No decimal error. No joke. The check sat like a stone in her hands, heavy with meaning she didn't yet understand. She looked at the card again. Monique and Tasha Reynolds, the Kindness Fund. Her mouth went dry. Her legs weakened, forcing her to slowly lower herself into the empty chair Monique had just vacated minutes earlier. The same man she hadn't even looked in the eyes. The same woman she had treated like an annoyance. Danielle blinked hard. A small folded note was tucked behind the check, almost hidden. She opened it slowly. In careful, elegant handwriting, it read, "We believe in tipping for service. But more than that, we believe in reminding people that kindness costs nothing and changes everything. M&T." Danielle felt a hot stink behind her eyes. She looked up, and suddenly, the cafe felt too bright, too loud, too exposed. The weight of everything she had done that afternoon began pressing down on her. Every microaggression, every cold shrug, every rolled eye, a missed opportunity to show even the barest decency. And in return, they had left her this. A kindness so wildly undeserved it pierced something deep inside her. She hadn't just been rude. She had been dismissive. She hadn't made a mistake. She had made a choice. Over and over. And they hadn't retaliated. They hadn't scolded. They hadn't even complained. They had simply shown grace and left her with a check that would change her bank account, and a note that might change something even deeper. "Danielle," the voice came from behind her. She turned quickly to see her manager, Mark, standing by the counter with a confused expression on his face. A few other baristas had paused, sensing something unusual. Even the college students she had been laughing with earlier glanced over. She realized only then that she was crying. Not loud sobs, but quiet, shaken tears that rolled freely down her cheeks as she held the check in trembling fingers. Mark stepped closer. "What happened?" She tried to speak, but her throat caught. She looked down at the check, then back at him, and slowly extended her hand. Mark took the folder and opened it. He stared at the number, blinking. "Is this real?" She nodded, her voice finally finding its way out. Hoarse, raw. "They left it." "Who?" "The couple at table 5, she said, barely above a whisper. "The ones I treated like crap." He looked at her, confused. "You know them?" She shook her head. "No. I judged them the second they walked in." There was no defensiveness, no attempt to explain, just the naked truth. Stripped bare by the weight of her own regret, the cafe grew quieter. Word began to spread. A few people approached, curious. Whispers followed. Danielle wiped her face with the edge of her apron. They asked for the manager. And I lied. I said you were busy, because I didn't want to deal with it. Mark said nothing. I thought they were going to complain. She continued, her voice cracking. But they left this. She gestured helplessly toward the check. Mark read the note, then looked back at her. His face was unreadable for a moment, then softened into something like understanding and concern. That's not just a tip, he said quietly. I know. It's a message. I know that too. Danielle stood slowly, brushing down her apron. Her legs still felt weak, but there was something shifting in her, not just shame, but awareness. The kind that doesn't fade when the tears stop, the kind that lingers. I've been working here 3 years, she whispered, and I've never once had a tip over $100. I've never cried over one either. Mark placed a hand on her shoulder. You should go take a break, she nodded. I think I need to. She stepped outside and leaned against the brick wall just beyond the entrance, the warm afternoon sun touching her face. It didn't feel comforting, not yet, but it didn't burn either. She thought about Malik's calm eyes, about Tasha's smile, not bitter, not smug, just disappointed. The way a teacher might look at a student who hadn't realized the damage they were doing. Danielle down at the check again, still in her hand. $10,000. But what echoed louder than the number were those last lines. Kindness costs nothing and changes everything. She'd thought she was teaching them something by treating them coldly. But in the end, they were the ones who had taught her. And for the first time in a very long while, Danielle realized she didn't want to be the same person she was when they walked in. Not ever again. Outside, the afternoon sun had dipped lower in the sky, painting the brick walls and sidewalk with warm amber tones. The café behind Danielle buzzed on, unaware that something had shifted, not in the building, but in her. She sat alone now on a bench just a few feet from the entrance. The black folder rested beside her, still holding the check. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her mind playing the day on repeat like a movie scene she couldn't escape or fast forward through. And then, slowly, a voice began to take shape, and not a literal one, but the kind of inner narration that comes only when silence allows truth to speak. It's easy to judge what we don't understand. The words landed with quiet gravity. It's easy to label people with the stories we've heard, or the ones we've invented ourselves. Danielle's eyes traced the sidewalk cracks beneath her feet. She had been raised in a small town, not a hateful place, but a quiet one, a place where different meant suspicious, and where people learned, in subtle ways, to keep their comfort zones small. No one had taught her to hate, but no one had taught her to question either. So the looks, the tone, the coldness, they had come naturally. To naturally. But grace, when met with cruelty, has the power to awaken something deeper in us. She thought of Malik's eyes, calm, steady. He had seen her from the very beginning, not just her uniform or her forced smile. He had seen through her, and still, he hadn't fought fire with fire. She remembered the moment he asked for the manager. She had felt a flicker of fear, thinking the confrontation was coming, but instead, he smiled. No threats, no anger, just kindness, offered not because she had earned it, but because he chose it. That shook her more than yelling ever could. And Tasha had looked at her with something far heavier than hatred. She had looked at her the way a mirror looks at someone refusing to face themselves. That hurt the most. That day, Danielle didn't just receive a tip. She looked down at the check again, still folded neatly in the folder beside her. It could pay off her credit card debt, clear her student loans. She could even take a break from this job if she wanted. Do something different, something meaningful. She hadn't decided yet, but one thing was certain. This wasn't just about the money. It never was. She received a lesson, not a loud one, not a dramatic one, but the kind of lesson that nestles deep beneath the skin, slow burning, irreversible. She thought back to all the times She had passed judgment without words, the eye rolls, the assumptions, the little ways she'd decided someone's worth before they had spoken a single word. She'd told herself it was harmless. But now she knew better. That $10,000 tip wasn't a reward. It was a mirror, and what it showed her was something she could no longer ignore. Inside the cafe, the same students she had been laughing with earlier were still seated. One of them pointed toward her through the window, whispering. She didn't care anymore. Let them talk. Let them guess. They hadn't been the ones who were handed grace when they didn't deserve it. She had. And now, she had to decide what to do with it. She stood slowly, slipping the checkbook into her bag. Her shoulders straightened as she walked toward the side alley where she parked. The sun warmed her face as she moved, not forgiving, not forgetting, but illuminating the way forward, because sometimes the greatest kindness is given not to repay, but to awaken. And somewhere in a modest cafe downtown, 2 names on a business card were now etched in her memory forever. M&T, the Kindness Fund. They had walked in as strangers, they had left as teachers, and they had given her something far more valuable than money. They had given her the chance to be someone new.